You're on mute.
It does not get old, does it? You are on mute, does not get old. Good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to have you all in the room today with us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining the Black and Aging third series from the Office of Healthy Aging. We are excited to welcome you to the panel. And before I hand that off to my colleague Greg, I want to share a brief and important message with the community. You may have heard that Medicaid is starting redeterminations beginning April 1st. And so EOHHS has been hosting a monthly forum, and that's the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, a monthly forum to keep Rhode Islanders up to date. It is a partner advocate forum, so it's coming from that lens. You'll learn more about the partners that are in the field that are available to help. You'll also learn more about what's happening in real time in regards to Medicaid renewals. Now, Medicaid renewals is not something new. It's something that we've done on traditionally every year. But due to COVID, the federal government wanted to keep everyone insured. And so this change is coming down from the federal government, and we're doing our best to make sure that Rhode Islanders are informed. So thank you, Nicole. Thank you, OHA, for allowing me to share this brief message. We're going to share the link on the Facebook page and in this chat. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you again, and have a wonderful morning with this fabulous panel. And I'll hand it over to Greg.
Thank you, Kyla. Good morning, everyone. Ms. Kyla gave such a great introduction. My name is Gregory Brunson. I serve as the Diversity Outreach Coordinator for the Memory and Aging Program. And once again, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in today to Black and Aging, Rhode Island's resources for Black seniors. This is our third and final panel discussion. Today's topic will be behavioral health and developmental disabilities. This event is brought to you by a partnership between the Office of Healthy Aging and the Memory and Aging Program at Butler Hospital in honor of Black History Month. I wanted to thank all of the panelists, and also thank and introduce for the last time a good friend and a great advocate for the Black community, Jim Vincent, the former NAACP Providence chapter president. Jim, thank you again for being such a gracious host, moderator, and as always, the advocacy and the work that you do for our community. With that being said, I'll pass it over to you to do your thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Greg, for those generous words. And I'd like to thank Nicole as well, Nicole Rivas, for this opportunity. So let's get into some stats. Historical trauma is an example of intergenerational trauma. It's caused by events that target a group of people. Thus, even family members who have not directly experienced the trauma can feel the effects of the event generations later. Black American adults are 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems, such as major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. African Americans are more likely than non-Hispanic whites to have a disability in every age group. 1 in 4 African Americans have a disability. 1 in 3 Black adults with a mental illness receive treatment. So I'd like to begin this panel discussion by having the panelists introduce themselves. So why don't we start with Mooney?
Yes, so my name is Manira Adabembe. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I started my career at working at a community mental health center, but then subsequently transitioned here to Butler Hospital, where I operate in a variety of different roles, but my main role right now is as an attending on one of our inpatient treatment units. It's a general treatment unit, but I've also worked in our inpatient assessment center, formerly known as the Patient Assessment Center, and it serves as a psychiatric emergency room for individuals who are experiencing any sort of acute mental illness or crisis or behavioral health crisis, to provide them with a readily available intervention. I also, during that time working in that particular area, started my private practice, Remembering You. And the goal was really to sort of like provide alternative avenues for individuals who identified as BIPOC and or others to feel like they could have a sense of connectedness with the practitioner who has studied extensively on some of the key facts that you mentioned earlier in your introduction, that, you know, having a provider who understands some of the generational traumas, a provider who has taken some time to really sort of understand what those circumstances can be, it may make it a little bit easier for someone to feel like they can walk through that door and talk about what they're struggling with as it relates to their behavioral health and overall mental health. So, and then I also coordinate multiple other programs like our residency program, but then also a nurse practitioner preceptorship program here at Butler Hospital to allow for growing opportunities for individuals who are looking to work in this field as well.
Well, thank you for that, Mooney. I'm going to move on to Jackie.
Yes, thank you, James. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Riley. I am the Programming Services Officer at BHDDH, which is fondly referred to, known to many as Buddha. That is the Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Hospitals. I started off my career in human services with the nonprofit sector, and then climbed my way up to management, and then joined state service because I figured there's a lot that can be done when it comes to individuals that live with and experience developmental disabilities. So, you know, just looking for new ways to address or deal with old issues, and ensuring that the individuals that are receiving services that are beneficial and impactful for them to live integrated, meaningful lives in the communities that they serve.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie. I'm going to go to our final panelist, last but not least, certainly, and that's Morris Akinfolarin. Morris?
Good morning, Jim. Good morning, my panelists. Thank you for having me. My name is Maurice Akinfolarin. I'm the Executive Director of Oasis International. We've been around for the past 30 years. Our mission is to promote culture, health, and facilitate community economy empowerment with emphasis on youth leadership. We've been doing this, you know, to help our Africans in diaspora. One of the areas that we focus mostly that brought us to this stage is the health wellness, you know, for people from the African in diaspora. We work primarily with a lot of immigrant community, faith-based institutions, you know, to help, you know, to encourage, you know, to educate about the health wellness of these individual communities. Like I said, you know, we've been doing this for the past 30 years, and we hope to continue to find a way, you know, to get our community to understand the basic of their vital science and education into behavioral educations. So thanks for having me, and hopefully I can contribute more.
Okay, thank you, Morris. I'm going to begin with some generalized questions, then I'll ask the panelists each some targeted questions. My first general question is, you know, we hear about behavioral health and developmental disability. What is behavioral health? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I can sort of talk a little about that. So I think a very general way to describe behavioral health is that it is the connection between the individual's health and the well-being of both the body and the mind, right? And it can include a variety of different things. Like, so we can talk about like anything from like your daily habits, your routine, your biology. And then in a lot of ways, sometimes behavioral health and mental health are terms that are used very interchangeably, but I think that there are a multitude of different factors that impact that. But in very general terms, it's essentially the mind, the well-being of the mind and the body.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go right into developmental disability. What is that?
Well, I can give a brief overview of what is considered as developmental disabilities. I'll go with the definition that the Center for Disease Control and Prevention gives. And it says that developmental disabilities are a group of conditions due to an impairment. It could either be physical, learning, language, or in the behavioral areas. And these conditions begin during the developmental period of an individual. That's at a young age and may impact the day-to-day functioning of the individual and usually last throughout the individual's lifetime. That in a nutshell is developmental disabilities. And you can also have like concurring diagnosis where you have the developmental disabilities and then also the behavioral health.
Well, Jackie, thank you for that. We want to make sure we start off defining these terms. So when subsequent questions come out, they'll provide a little bit more context. All right. How important is it for Black folks to seek out culturally competent care? And that's for any other panelists.
Yeah, from my end, Maurice Akinfolana, I think it's very, very important for our community to seek medical help in behavioral health. But unfortunately, I think that's not the case around us. The case around us is people do believe mostly on faith-based, instead of them seeking help. They rather go to their pastors, their imam, to seek help. And that is one of the challenges that we are facing as a community. We've been doing this now, like I said, for 30 years, continuously to educate our community that it's very, very important for you to seek medical help. Nothing wrong in you praying, nothing. We are not against that. But we want you to actually, do your medical first before you go into your pastor or your imam.
Yeah, and I would also compound on that because, there are a lot of individuals who go into the field of medicine and even behavioral health, but particularly, there's a struggle sometimes, right? Because sometimes there isn't trust, right, between you and your provider. But culturally, I think that a lot of the different medical programs that are out now, and a lot of even when I reflect back on my own training, I had to seek out additional training, in order to be increasingly more aware of a variety of different cultures beyond my own. So I identify as a Nigerian American, and I think that in my own culture, some of the things that we find is that there is a very strong stigma towards mental health and mental illness and behavioral health. And so one of the things that I really feel is extremely important beyond, even if an individual feels that the only person they can turn to is their imam or their pastor, what I have found is that those individuals can be useful resources, right? So whether it's educating those individuals a bit more about behavioral health and mental health and mental wellness and the things that they can do in order to help encourage those individuals to seek more professional treatment rather than just feeling as though they have to be completely different entities. Oftentimes hearing from your imam or your pastor that it's okay to seek help and that it is a very judgment-free zone, and providing those individuals with additional training that oftentimes can really just be what helps propel that individual to seek that additional treatment and that help. But finding culturally competent providers and practitioners, I think, is a problem that the state as a whole has really sort of struggled with. I know here at Butler, I'm one of very few African Americans or Nigerian Americans. And when I see a person of color that walks through the door, I oftentimes want to be the person to treat them, because I know the importance of what it's like to have a sense of belonging or a sense of understanding just by seeing someone who looks like you, who can also treat you.
Mhm. And just to add on to what Muni has said, eloquently stated, yeah, culture does play a very pivotal role when it comes to the Black community and seeking out resources that are out there. Most of them qualify or are eligible for certain benefits, but because of the stigma associated with certain diagnoses, people stay away from seeking those resources. So it's upon us, the state, community leaders, and religious leaders to band together and to encourage people and to let them know that there is help and, there are resources out there that can help them, overcome certain hurdles as they go through life experiences. And it should be something that people should take advantage from the onset, rather than utilizing it as an emergency avenue, whereby you're going to seek medical attention last minute when things have spiraled out of control. You can start this process earlier as a preventative measure.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists, for that. Now, this question is for any of the panelists. Why is there a wide disparity in the identification of disabilities by race and ethnicity?
I can kick off that. I think it's because, when culture takes center stage, most people don't step up. So you find surveys and research studies that are done, the Black community is not represented in that data because they are not invited most of the time. And sometimes the way it's structured, they feel like it's going to be punitive in nature. So, most Black communities tend to stay away from those kind of engagements. And then also when the people who are conducting those efforts sometimes don't seek out the voice of, members of the Black community, and they're completely left out of that whole process. And then whatever policies, procedures, and systems that are put into place don't actually take into account the experiences of those that are in the Black community.
I will also, everything you said, Jackie, plus the Obama administration actually, during that administration, they recognized that this was a problem, right? That people of color who identified as individuals of, BIPOC populations were not represented in a lot of these studies. And I think that it's not because we don't want to, but I think that there historically has been a pattern of distrust with the medical system, right? And so there was a program that was initiated throughout the Obama administration called the All of Us Research Program, because one of the things that we are finding is that a lot of the medications, a lot of the treatments, a lot of, multiple options that are provided are based on the evidence that supports individuals of different backgrounds other than those that identify as people of color, right? So research is happening around depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. I mean, you can name a lot of different illnesses, but a wide majority of those populations are individuals who are identified as Caucasian. So then treatment measures are then implemented, for individuals. And so we're not taking into account genetics. We're not taking into account biology. We're not taking into account a lot of things. And so we sort of, in a way, by not engaging in preventative measures or even engaging in research opportunities, it's leading to a detriment overall for what options are actually truly available for us that are based on true evidence that involves research studies with individuals of color.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to go to the next question. Does the wealth gap in older working adults contribute to African American seniors developing disabilities?
Yeah, I think to some extent it does, because when you look at issues that are associated with poverty, you know, if a family cannot afford to buy, you know, nutritious food, then what are the options? Majority of the Black families or Black community, you'll find that they rely so much on fast food, which is just a lot of processed food that has no nutritional value. And that is what they feed their children. And I can attest to that because when I host some of my son's friends, you know, they're always like, are we going to McDonald's? Are we going to Burger King? And I'm like, no, this mommy is cooking. You know, I happen to be privileged to be able to find the time. But then the thing is, when you look at Black families, we are constantly working, trying to provide, you know, you have to pay for housing, for utilities, for other needs. So finding a balance between the needs to pay for daily living or, you know, comfortable living, and then also the nutritional aspect of it, which sometimes if you want to get good food, it tends to be expensive. So they opt out for cheaper avenues, which, you know, end up then causing, you know, health issues from a younger age. And if those are not addressed, which means as they get older, the problems compound. And therefore you find that a lot of people in the Black community, you know, suffer from issues of obesity and other obesity-related ailments.
In addition to that, I think that, you know, when we talk about wealth, I think that we have to talk about education. We have to talk about socioeconomic status. We have to talk about, you know, just sort of like so many predisposing factors that significantly over a period of time can impact how one's outlook, right, on food and nutrition, and also prioritizing their needs can change and evolve. One thing that I think is really important that I think that, you know, we struggle with in the Black community is just reading nutritional labels, right? And having this sort of wherewithal to understand that and how that is going to sort of impact our overall health. So I think that, you know, when we think of healthy eating, folks may just associate that with like going to Trader Joe's or going to Whole Foods or, you know, like, and I think that those are some of the things that require significant deconstruction, because you can still buy healthy meal options and food options, even if you're shopping at Price Right, you know what I mean? But being able to educate individuals on different nutritional label factors and how that is impacting your overall health is something that is also key. I personally, like when I meet with my patients, oftentimes we'll go over sort of like, what are your dietary habits? Because what you put into your body can also impact how you feel. And I think a lot of providers don't necessarily go over that with their patients. They don't necessarily take the time to understand what are some of the things that you're eating and how could that be contributing to some of these long-term stress factors or even mental health factors, right? So I do think that there are lots of things that we can do educationally to help empower, even though we have this wealth gap and a lot of other socioeconomic sort of concerns that are still significant, but I think that there are some little things that we can do along the way to help individuals feel more comfortable.
Thank you for that.
In a little bit, I support all the recommendations. You know, one of the things that we've been doing on my end is education. You know, I think it's very, very important. Starting with 10 years old, you know, along, you know, that they need to watch what they are eating. This goes a long way, you know, with our young folks. Elders, they have their own share of life, you know, but we are not giving, you know, we continue to stage a lot of community education program. ranging from the food that we are eating, ranging from the high blood pressure, that is impacting our elders, and we are not taking charge of that. So I think the focus for us, at Oasis has always been the education. And we will continue to do that, to see how we will continue to impact, our community to do the right thing.
And just to add on what Maurice has said, once we offer the education, the next step would be to encourage the community to seek access to the resources that are available, because sometimes we offer the education and then stop there. So the next step would be, okay, this is what is healthy, and these are the places or the resources that you can access it, and then encourage the community to go out and seek those resources.
Okay, this is the final general question before then I'll get into my targeted questions. And it is, what are some cultural responses Black caregivers can do to help a loved one living with severe mental illness or developmental disability?
I can kick that off. I think first is just trying to understand, because our culture and most other cultures that are not based off, the US, those that come in as immigrant, we tend to rely on how we were brought up. And in my community, I know it's men don't break down, men are always strong. Black people don't get stressed out. You take it in stride and you move on. So it's just understanding that the world is changing, and then there are various other things that come into play when it comes to making life difficult and stressful. So understanding the changing environment, and then also understanding what supports and systems you need to have in place to support your loved ones so that they can live a fully integrated life within your family structure and then the community that they belong to.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to go to the chart. Go ahead.
Okay, nope, it's all good. Let's go. Let's keep moving.
And first targeted question is going to go to Morris, my friend Morris. Morris, would you be willing to speak to how Oasis International is helping its community to continue the fight against social inequities and the resources it offers?
We've been working along the line, to fight against social inequities for many years. Basically because I myself, I am an immigrant, and I know what it is. I've been here for many years now. Being here for many years doesn't stop you from orienting yourself to better understand, the medical world is so vast, that no one single soul can know it all. So you need to seek advice. You need to work with people like Butler. You need to work with many of these institutions to bring resources to our community, which we have done very well, and that's why we have health wellness programs, to actually, educate, in terms of, the type of food that we are eating, the vital science, the cancer, getting a vaccine, we work vigorously during the pandemic. We are just like the resource center for the African immigrant community, giving us so many supplies, during the pandemic. So it's an ongoing activities from my end. We have designed our program. If you don't come to us, we are coming to you. That has always been the new model. Initially when we started, we want people to come. We want them to, come to the program. I guess at one point in time, everybody just busy in their own world. So now we design our program by working with the imams, working with the faith-based leaders, arranging ahead of time, to bring programs of health wellness, to the church. And when you look at the population of our service-based churches, it's huge. I can tell you we have almost about 30-something interdenominational churches in Rhode Island that are African-based. And we have the mosque, that we need to tend to, So we've been, working vigorously. There's no end to it because our partners are even asking us, we work with the Department of Health, they are partner in many, many programs, including tobacco, for the deterrent of tobacco in our community for the youth, the high blood pressure, So all these programs are part of, what we are offering, to help fight against social inequities of our community. And like I said, we will continue to look for partnership, to see how we can do things, to benefit our community, the African community. That's what we've been doing.
Thank you, Morris. You've done quite a lot. Next question is to Muni. What are the mechanisms and drivers that are impacting African Americans to be at a higher risk for developing mental illnesses compared to Caucasian Americans?
So I think that there are very concrete things that are happening that I think impact people of color and that puts them at a higher risk. So things that we have to consider are things like microaggressions that a lot of people of color face on a day-to-day basis. So those subtle, whether they're overt or covert microaggressions or macroaggressions, can significantly impact stress levels for people of color. So imagine being in a white space as a person of color who may come from a very different background and feel the need to, the term code switch is oftentimes utilized in order to be sort of, seen as someone who is professional and valuable to an organization. Other things are stigma, right? But all of those things significantly impact and can exacerbate multiple factors. So it can lead to chronic stress, chronic anxiety, specifically microaggressions, especially like if a person of color who's in a white space, thinking about how you're saying things consistently on a daily basis in order for it to be viewed as appropriate or not, not aggressive, right? So there's that notion of like the angry Black woman and trying to consistently avoid that being how you're viewed in your organization. As a Black woman who's been in white spaces, I think that oftentimes that can feel very overwhelming because you're consistently rechecking your email, and those sort of things can lead to chronic anxiety, chronic stress. And what we know about chronic stress is that it can lead to issues like obesity, high blood pressure, hypertension. And so these are all like what we call very like silent factors in the like behavioral health and mental health. And as we work on achieving better mental health and better mental wellness, these are all things that I think that it's important for individuals to pay attention to. Stigma, I think overall too, sometimes is actually one of the more predominant factors. Feeling as though it's not okay to ask for help. There is a significant amount of, especially for me as a Nigerian American, I think that, in our culture, they look at certain deities or spells, different things of that nature that may have caused an illness, and how that deters individuals. So going to like traditional medicine healers versus utilizing what research shows us has been efficacious in treating some of these illnesses. So I think that there are a multitude of factors, but stigma, microaggressions, macroaggressions, chronic stress, I think socioeconomic factors are also very prominent players in why we see individuals sort of being adverse to treatment.
Okay. Thank you, Mooney. Jackie, what are the most common disabilities the state is seeing associated with older Black folks?
Okay, so I would like to first start off my answer, by prefacing my responses with the following disclaimer. So I know I introduced myself as being affiliated with the Department of Developmental Disabilities, but I also just want to let you know that, the views that I'm expressing are not the department's views, but these are views that are based on my own professional and personal or lived experiences as a woman and as a person of color. Okay, so having said that, gotten that out of the way, so in my own humble opinion, I think the disabilities that face older communities of color, closely mirrors those disabilities that are faced by other ethnicities, but the caveat is limited access to services, which tends to exacerbate, the issues. According to the Center for Disease and Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, the numbers they came up with that for disabilities for older adults is that 3 in 10 people for American Indian or Alaskan Native have disabilities. And then Blacks, it's 1 in 4. Then whites, it's 1 in 5. And then for Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders, it's 1 in 6. Hispanics, 1 in 6. And then for Asians, 1 in 10. Now, the same numbers when they consider those who are obese and smoke. There's some concerns for American Indians or Alaskan Native. You get that 40.6% are obese, and then 41.2% smoke. And then for Blacks, the Black community, you have 47.3%, which is almost 50% are obese. But then the smoking rate is a little lower. It's 28.1%. Whites, you have 35.5% who are obese, and then 28.7 are smokers. The Hawaiian or Pacific Highlanders, you have 31.8 that are obese and 28.2. And then for the Hispanic community, you have 39.9% that are obese and then 20.6 smoke. For the Asian community, you have 20% that are obese and then 12.8% are smokers. Now, we all know that obesity comes, associated with different ailments. And some of these are like, things like food problems, arthritis, cognitive impairment, heart problems, vision, hearing impairment, then chronic respiratory or cardiovascular issues. Other things that also come into play, falls and fractures. And then we've also seen that with the onset of COVID, there are increasing numbers of, populations or people in the Black community that have been diagnosed with things like stress, anxiety, depression, dementia, opioid use and substance use disorders. So when I saw those numbers, I was like, this is interesting. So I tried to figure out what other community partners are thinking. And the National Alliance on Mental Health, because this is just something that is taking a hold of so many communities, give their insight on the following question. And the question that they had asked was, what happens at the intersection of mental health and one's experience as a member of the Black community? And they observed the following, that while the experience of being Black in America varies tremendously, there are some shared cultural factors that play a role in helping define mental health and supporting well-being, resilience, and healing. So parts of this shared culture experience include family connections, values expressed through spiritual or music, and then resilience on community and religious network. Also some other things that the community can utilize to enrich and provide resources to strengthen and support its community. But most of the time you find that people don't access these resources because they're too busy just going, because they have to work, the studies show that majority in the Black community work 2 or 3 jobs. So you really don't have time to slow down and plan and strategize. So it's constantly going and not planning. So we need to take a step back, and community leaders need to encourage people to step back and plan, what do you want your future to look like? And what systems should you have in place to help you achieve meaningful life and living within your community?
Well, thank you, Jackie, for that. Hey, we're at 11:18. I'm going to go to Greg to see if there's any questions from the viewing audience.
At this moment, certainly, as questions come in, I'll be sure to let you know.
Okay.
If we just want to continue with the discussion,
Okay.
we can do that. And as I said, as the questions come in, I'll be sure to let you know.
All right. Thanks, Greg. All right. So Morris, you're the next one up. Can you speak about the obstacles you had to overcome as an African immigrant in Rhode Island and how the experience impacted your mental health?
Thank you, James. This one of the obstacles is understanding the medical world in America. I mean, it goes all over the US, for us as immigrants, coming in here, we grew up in different ways based on our culture. Sometimes, the American medical world is quite different from us growing up in places like Africa. I think in America, either you have the money or you don't have the money, you will be treated. We came from where you don't have the money, you don't get treated. So you have to go to traditional medicine. You don't even know what you are treating with traditional medicine to say, if I thought we have some expert, but you tend to do it on your own. So over here, I think there's a lot of lesson to learn, to overcome the obstacle. And that is one of the pilot thing that we've been doing for many years on our health awareness, to get to know the institutions that are providing services in America, most especially in Rhode Island. So we now seek to partner with many of them in order for us to bring resources to our community. And that's what really brought us to Butler, Memory and Aging program, because dementia and Alzheimer runs a lot in our community, but we are hiding it. It's either we call them witch or something, the stigma, in order for us not to find a way to treat them, So now we are learning. We are serving on the Memory and Aging community program to bring resources to our churches, to bring resources to the mosque by working with the imam and working with the pastors. It's working well because we get to invite the professionals, to come in, and help out. Because those are things I can't do that. I'm not a professional or medical things, but I know where to find people to help us out. So we work collaboratively with Butler, Tara and their team, to work with us on the outreach, that has impacted our community, to dilute the stigma to say somebody is a witch when actually they have Alzheimer, When people start talking, they say, oh yeah, it's a wish. And it's not, this is not a wish issue. This is a medical issue that needs to be addressed. Not only here, it's happening back home. So I visit, oh my God, you see people running from their, because they are talking somehow and they figure, that this woman must have killed a lot of people. But the woman did kill you when you were young. Age is that when they're gonna kill you? Memory and aging program has helped us a lot. And to top it off, I think we partner with Neighborhood Health, Providence Health Center, Lifespan, Blue Cross, and TOF, and Department of Health. That is how we get to solve our issues, solve our problem, in order for us to bring a very educational program, in our, community as a whole.
Thank you for that. Muni, as a mental health nurse practitioner for Butler Hospital, why do you think the public has a sense of resistance associated with Butler Hospital, and what can be done about it?
So I think that the community has a sense of resistance, not just to Butler, but I think to mental health treatment overall. And I think, the more and more just, sort of like reflecting on some of the things that Morris has shared, I think that those are some of the main reasons, right? Because of their upbringing. So there are certain studies that have been done. So like the ACEs study, which looks at adverse childhood experiences. And that study shows us very specifically when we add in and we factor in for race and minority and ethnicity, that Black children are at a greater risk of having higher adverse experiences in their childhood, right? So over time, what ends up happening, because, you're told in your community that if you're, I remember like growing up in Nigeria, if someone was to say like they're sad, it's like, why are you sad? You're breathing, you're living, you're alive. Like, there's a lot of there's a lot of these things that are dismissed. And I think that those are some of the things that help to compound sometimes resiliency for a lot of folks. So then they feel like they can take on more, manage more. They sort of engage in a lot of their own self-thought, trying to identify in ways in which they can cope with some of the things they can be struggling with, because very often these individuals are told that there's no reason for them to be feeling the way that they're feeling. And so I think that there's resistance to Butler Hospital because it feels as though you are no longer able to manage effectively on your own. I think that there's a sense of like weakness associated with it. But I think that transcribes across just how we view Blacks and mental health as a whole, right? And whether their willingness to accept help, their willingness to reach out for help, their willingness to acknowledge some of the things that they're struggling with internally. And unfortunately, what we then sort of see is, that they try very, very arduously in order to sort of like manage and cope on their own. But this is where we start to see a lot of individuals present in crisis because they've tried to really sort of manage. And when that management is no longer effective, then we see them in crisis and oftentimes results sometimes in inpatient hospitalization, sometimes outpatient stabilization. But one of the most important things during that time period is providing them with as much support as possible, but then also having them understand that education, providing that additional education so that they don't feel alone as they're processing this, because it is, again, a medical condition, right? And I oftentimes love to refer back to that because the brain is just such a unique organism in the sense that there's so much that we don't know about it. And what we do know is that childhood experiences can significantly impact your mental health and your mental wellness as an adult, and even more as an older adult. And so really trying to help those people feel more comfortable with the idea of actually getting mental health treatment is important. Deconstructing some of that stigma, engaging in a lot of social norming in a lot of the Black community. So what Oasis is doing I think is wonderful. I think that we need to reach out to a lot of other Black organizations as well, or BIPOC organizations, to help to start to deconstruct the stigma and engage in a social norm that is accepting of having conversations about your mental health and your mental wellness, and that allows you to feel like you can talk openly about it and not be ostracized, where that's sort of what we see with a lot of people with different cultural backgrounds. Is the minute they start to talk about it, they're ostracized by their family. And so then what the behavior that is learned is to not talk about it and to figure out how to deal with it on your own. I also think that it's important to recognize that several years ago, the APA did issue an apology to individuals of the Black race, because of, and not just the Black race, but BIPOC communities, because of the simple fact that there have been things that have been done in this, as we think about psychology and we think about the history of it, there have been things that have been done that have been grave injustices and inequities towards individuals of color. And of course, there are things that they are trying to do to repair that relationship with the community. But I think it's important to know that the overarching organization that is really sort of supporting the work that we do is trying its best to infuse a lot of these different cultural components into the education and the outreach so that individuals can feel more comfortable reaching out when they need help.
Good, thank you. It's 11:28. Greg, do I have time to ask another question of a panelist?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is going to go to Jackie. What kinds of discrimination do people with disabilities face?
Okay, people with disabilities face widespread discrimination, segregation, and inclusion and exclusion. And this is despite us having federal laws and regulations that protect individuals with disabilities. So there are 4 types of discrimination that are perpetuated against individuals with disabilities. It could be directly, indirectly, it could come in the form of harassment or victimization. So when it's directly perpetuated, this deals with having facilities that are not ADA compliant. And when the individual is using those facilities, they're not able to contribute to their optimal because they're limited due to lack of access. And then there's also employment discrimination, whereby employers feel like it's an added burden to employ somebody with a disability. Then they have to go the extra mile and provide the different resources that the individuals need. Then there's due to the cost element, you find that most employers are reluctant or limit or employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities. And those are just the disabilities that we can see physically. Now, there are other disabilities that are invisible and we cannot see, things that deal or touch on mental health, things like depression, things like anxiety, those also require some accommodation. And when an individual expresses that, they are sort of met with some resistance, and you sort of like want to sideline them because you don't want to create the environment as an employer to support the individual, because it's going to come at a cost. So it's important to bear those things in mind as a community, and especially for those individuals that are charged with providing opportunities for individuals to engage in a meaningful way within their communities.
Thank you, Jackie.
Well, yeah, thank you all for your participation and for this great panel discussion. In closing, I just want to ask one final question to the group. What are existing resources that the community should be aware of in closing?
I can kick off this. with the state, I know the state has different resources, and the state now has taken a new approach whereby, they're using data to inform their decision-making process. So as a result of that, the state has come up with various collaborative effort with our community partners to engage the community in the process of making resources available. So I would urge anyone that seeks, to receive assistance from the state to, go to online and research BHDDH. We have 3 divisions, that is Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental Disabilities, and then the hospitals. And these divisions provide assistance to individuals who qualify for those benefits, and not just the individuals, but their families too, to enable them to, gainfully contribute and also live within the communities that they exist in.
Yeah, and I would also say too that, one of the things I've been really proud of here at Butler is, there was our emergency room. And I think that oftentimes people didn't feel like what they were going through classified as an emergency. And so we've just opened our outpatient assessment center, the OEC, which allows for people to just sort of like come in and talk about what you're going through and not be fearful that like you're going to be admitted to a hospital, whether that's voluntary or involuntarily, but providing you with multiple options and resources. I think in the community, there's a BH Link. And so I know that that has been a pretty consistent funnel for us as well. And I think that Butler Hospital as a whole, because of the name, I think naturally people are just like, oh, it's a hospital, right? But there are so many other programs, obviously memory and aging, which is a department that Greg works in, but we have outpatient options, Integra. So even if you're just looking for an outpatient provider, you can find that on this campus. So I encourage folks to just come to the campus, like see what the options are, talk with someone, visit the OEC if you're struggling, and find out what opportunities and what resources they can provide you. We even have partial hospital programs where, oftentimes people, know that they need like a break from work for whatever, whether it's depression or anxiety. One of the things that we always strongly encourage is engaging in a partial hospital program where you can be actively working on some of the like CBT skills, cognitive behavioral therapy, even sometimes DBT, and mindfulness that can assist you in being able to return back to work in a healthy manner. And so there are a multitude of options, a multitude of programs. And I think, prior to even embarking on this work, I didn't really know that Butler existed, right? I didn't even know it was a option until I started working in like my early 20s. I didn't know that there were options for individuals, but I think that we've done a substantial job in providing opportunities that are not daunting or, scary or make individuals feel fearful to reach out for help. So lots of outpatient, lots of emergency and crisis options, but then also, like an opportunity for you to engage in ongoing wellness and overall stabilizing your behavioral and mental health. And lots of research opportunities too. So if you're interested in doing some research, I strongly, around anxiety or depression, I strongly encourage you to look at our website so that you can participate. That's one of the things I really try to advocate for, is more people of color being a part of a lot of these research studies, so that the treatments that are available are reflective of our population.
Well, thanks, Moody, for that. Very well said. So, Greg.
Was it Roy Morris? Were you going to say something there?
Yeah, we are just a resource center for any African American medical things that we know as a community. We can always look for solutions. If we don't have it within, we have a lot of partners that work with us, and they range from youth program to young professionals programs. So Oasis has always been around, like I said, for 30-something years, that are providing services, to the immigrant community and African American community.
Thank you. Thank you all. We will conclude today's panel discussion. Once again, my name is Greg Brunson. Thank you to Nicole over at the Office of Healthy Aging. Thank you to Jim, Mooney, Jackie, Morris, and all those that have been in attendance today. It has been a great panel discussion, and it has been a great opportunity to honor those of Black History Month. And so I hope that everybody was able to pull some great information from these discussions. These discussions will be on the Office of Healthy Aging's Facebook to view, and also on the Memory and Aging Programs Facebook as well. So with that being said, I'll give everybody their day back, and thank you all once again for your participation. Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.